Hey guys, it's Charlene. Today I'm sharing a card that I made with the new Lovely Layers apple barrel. This is a really cool die set. I'm going to start out here by cutting some different colors of cardstock. For my apple barrel here, I'm starting with some craft paper. So I've cut out the base. I'm going to cut out the top as well, and then you'll see later I cut out the detail piece, and I'm going to do that here now in some gray cardstock. So there's two little detail pieces that layer up to create the band around the apple barrel. Now I'm going to cut out several of these apples. I'm going to cut out enough to make 8 double layered apples. So you'll see how I layer those up here in a minute. For my leaves, I'm cutting out 2 sets of light green and 2 sets of dark green. Now this die has a couple of small leaves as well as a couple of large leaves. And now I'm going to cut out the center of the apple blossoms here in some yellow cardstock, the stems of the apples in some dark brown cardstock. And again, I'm cutting these out in multiples. So you can see I have that little scrap of brown paper there, but that's going to be plenty to cut out 8 different little apple stems there. And for the apple blossoms, I'm just cutting them out in some white cardstock. I'm cutting enough to make 4 double layered apple blossoms. So for the apples here, like I said, I am layering these up. The die that comes with the set cuts out 2 different shaped apples. So I cut it 8 times, and that allowed me to have a total of 16 pieces, 8 of one type of apple, 8 of the other type of apple. So that way when I layered them up, I had 4 of each apple. So now here's where the fun detail part comes in for these apples. This is going to give you a really lifelike result. Here I'm just taking a white gel pen and I am dotting all over the front of the apple. No rhyme or reason to how I'm dotting here. I'm just putting a lot of dots down all the way around on the apple. So now you can see I've got some aged mahogany distress ink here, and I'm just using a little detail brush to go around all of the edges of the apples. That's going to give the apples some depth and dimension because it's going to add that shading all the way around, especially on the sides there of those apples. And then I'm going to give a quick little once over as well with the ink when I'm all done, just with what's left on the brush. And that's going to tone down those white dots, but it's going to give you that look of a fresh apple that has all of that little dot pattern all over it and has that bright shiny center. To add even more detail, I'm coming in here with some R59, and I just went along those lines where the die embossed a little bit onto the apples. And now I'm adding my stems. So you can see I'm using my reverse tweezers. This makes it a lot easier to do. And I actually squeezed out a little dot of glue there, so that way I'm not getting too much glue on those stems. It makes it a lot easier as well. And now I have 8 cute little apples. Love that. So for my leaves, all I'm doing here is I'm coming in with some G85 on the dark green leaves, and I'm marking where the veining is on those leaves. Again, you can see it from the die cut, so it's really easy to do. And then I went over the whole leaf with some G00. Now you're not going to actually see the G00, but what it does is it helps to blend out the G85. Same concept for the lighter leaves, only I used YG23 and YG00. For our apple barrel here, I'm doing a similar thing. I'm using E47, which is my dark brown here. I'm marking all the little spots that you can actually see from the die cut. And then I'm going over everything just to blend it all out with some E37. Really, really easy to do, but it's going to give the final piece so much depth and dimension because it's going to look like it's been hand colored to have all of that variation in it, when in reality, all I'm doing is just following the lines of the die cut. So simple. So here you can see now that the Copic marker has dried, just how cool it looks with all of that added dimension on there. Oh, love it. For the apple blossoms, I went ahead and I cut out 4 sets of those, and I'm going to layer them up so that I have a total of 4 apple blossoms. Really easy to do to layer these dies up, and it just adds so much because it gives your die cuts a lot of life and dimension because of how much it raises them up off the top of your card. But because you're only layering them slightly, it's really not going to increase the thickness or bulk of your card by very much. Still makes it very easy to mail if that's what you want to do. So for the shading on the apple blossoms here, I'm just using some W1. It's a really light warm gray. And then for the centers here, I'm dotting where the die indicates with some Y35. I am layering those up as well on the center of the apple blossoms. And once they're done, you can see there just how much depth these really have. They look really cool. You can even see it in the video, just how substantial doing that layering makes them look. For the binding that goes around the barrel, you could do this in wood tones as well, or you can do it in kind of metal silver tones, which is what I did there. I used some C5 to hit the little rivets and around the edges, and then again I blended everything out with some C0. Cool grays are great for metal. They really make things look nice. I layered the 2 pieces up, just using some liquid adhesive there, and now I can go ahead and glue that piece directly onto the top piece here of the wood barrel. I like it in the metal because I feel like it kind of breaks up the wood and makes things look pretty interesting. But like I said, you could definitely do that in wood tone as well. So here we have the lovely Layers barnwood fence, which is beautiful. I cut that out in some white cardstock, and I'm actually going to trim it down because I don't want it to take up the whole front of my card. So you can see I'm going to take it right over the top of the second slat that goes across the pieces there, and I'm just going to cut it here with my paper trimmer. Now I can go ahead and glue that first slat over the top part there so it looks like it's, you know, a regular white picket fence where it has those slats kind of nailed in. I love how much detail you're getting with the wood grain on here. You could add some shading on this, but I really wanted my background to just be full of white. So I've got the lovely Layers Fall Flourish cover plate die. You guys, this cover plate is gorgeous, and I'm cutting that out of some white cardstock as well. Now I can move on to my sentiment. I'm using the Awesome to the Core stamps and dies. I've picked it out from that set, which coordinates really well with everything else I'm using today. I've got some black cardstock here. I've got my anti-static powder tool, and then I've just stamped my sentiment in some clear embossing ink. Now I'm using some white embossing powder. I love the look of white embossing powder on black cardstock. And now I can just melt the whole thing with my heat gun. If you ever struggle with white embossing powder, you can also try stamping in white pigment ink and then using your white embossing powder. That does tend to help some people. Now I can cut everything out with the dies, and I did go ahead and cut 2 extra using the dies, so that way I can layer these up as well. You can see I've already layered up the You're Awesome, and here I'm layering up the To the Core. These dies cut really nicely, very close all the way around the sentiment. I love, love, love that. So once those dry, I'm going to put together the whole card. I've got a piece of black cardstock that I've cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. This is going to be an A2 size card, so that black cardstock is covering the entire front of my card base. And now I am going to glue on that background from the Fall Flourish cover plate. I did cut this down, and I used the Sweet Stacks rectangles, the second smallest one. So there's going to be just a slight black border all the way around that gorgeous pierced image. I added some foam tape to the back of my fence so that way it can pop up off the back of the card. This is going to make it just like look real lifelike. I love it. And I folded down the foam tape strips in half so that way I could place my piece on there. Once I liked how it looked, I could push down the top part, and now I can just pull off the rest of the release tape and push down the other half. Great tip if you struggle at all with kind of positioning things when you use double-sided foam tape. I'm going to glue the bottom part of the wood barrel onto my fence, and then I'm actually going to place all of my apples before I glue on the top piece. Now there's lots of different ways that you can do this. I find this to be easiest for me, but some people like to put together the barrel and then place everything. For me, I like to be able to kind of move things around in case I need to before I adhere that top part of the barrel down. So I'm going to make these apples look like they are nice and piled up. So I'm coming in and putting 3 along the bottom, and I'm going to put 3 along the top, but you'll see I'm tucking the top ones behind the bottom layer of apples. So that way it looks like these are really piled up in that barrel. And you'll notice that my bottom center apple is kind of down a little bit, and my top center apple is up a little bit, so that it kind of is mimicking that oval shape that's at the top of the barrel. Now I can glue down the top of the barrel on here. Not everything is going to be touching, even though I put glue over the whole thing, but enough things will be sticking together that that's not going to move around. I did put an acrylic block on there just while it was drying. I added an apple blossom in that bottom left corner, and then I'm layering 2 apples here just so they look like maybe they fell out of the bucket. Adding an apple blossom on top of them, as well as one in the bucket to create a triangle there with those. And now I can glue down my sentiment. I put the to the core down just for placement while I was adhering the top part, and then I adhered to the core. And now I have gone around all over on the card and added just different leaves here and there, tucked them in behind the blossoms, as well as on top of the apples. This also just adds a little bit of color to the card so that it makes it more vibrant. A little bit of bling is always a great idea, so I'm using the Heartfelt Harvest gem stickers, and I'm using various sizes of the dark red. So here is the finished card. Oh, I love how this looks. I hope you guys picked up some tips and tricks today. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit the notification bell so that you'll get notified about future videos here on the Honeybee Stamps YouTube channel. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.